The Big Biller Summit 2010 included a really interesting speech by Bob Marshall, and some of it is very, very detailed. You need to listen to the full 1 hour unabridged version, but I'm going to try and give you the highlighted points. He talks about 5 areas, a 5-pronged approach to setting up a $500,000 a year desk. So let's call it a $250,000 or £300,000 a year desk. And of course some of the numbers are different to ours because they've got an average fee of $20,000, which is probably what, £12,000. But the principles are still the same. So for him, it's about knowing your numbers. Secondly, it's about quarterly goals, breaking it down to monthly, weekly and daily. Then planning in detail. And whilst a lot of recruiters use to-dos, they don't actually plan their days. He also talks about modularization and blitzing, which of course is linked into planning. It's about making sure that at certain times we do certain things to the exclusion of everything else. And lastly, he talks about the 100-point sheet. So, first off, and I'll read some of this out verbatim because I can't improve upon it, but he talks about that whatever you believe about the economy is what you'll receive. In other words, if you believe we're in a sluggish economy, then there's no reason not to believe that you'll get sluggish results. And if you believe we're in a good economy, you'll get good results. It's called the self-fulfilling prophecy. But more specifically, what he's noticed is that with his students, the ones that feel really good about how things are going are the ones that are billing at high levels. And the ones that are moaning and groaning about everything being so bad, they're the ones that are not getting results. So, if we think about it from an NLP point of view or the subconscious, what we tell ourselves is what we actually get. Now, what he also talks about is that people that are consistently billing good numbers, they have a certain way about them. They do certain things on a consistent basis. But people that are struggling, that are not doing so well, their billing's on a roller coaster. They might have 1 month when they're doing a huge number of deals, and the next 2 months they're really down in the doldrums. And he says there are reasons for that. And if we can identify what those reasons are, we can eliminate those reasons. Guess what? We get rid of the roller coaster effect. He also talks about knowledge deficiencies and lack of ability to execute. So as a trainer, any trainer's job, any manager's, any director's job is to give the staff the information that they need to make sure that they have got the knowledge in place, that they've been trained properly. But if the person isn't actually doing those things, if that recruiter is not actually following the system, using the training that's been provided, well, it's not the trainer's fault, it's not the manager's or director's fault, it's actually down to the recruiter. So it's not a knowledge problem, it becomes an execution problem. Now, he talks about the fact that a lot of people have got big accounts and they rely upon that business, and yet they become suckered into relying upon that relationship to provide them with their income, and then they don't do enough work behind the scenes to replace that should it fall out of bed or there's a change of relationship. So he's talking about making sure that come what may, we're always on the phone prospecting for new relationships, as well of course as maintaining existing ones and account management. So for him, he talks about a prospect list of 3,000 companies. Now that might sound a lot, but he's talking about getting through to only 20% of those people, and actually only 2% of them giving them jobs which they're going to actually work on. Now our ratios are probably very different, but it boils down to one thing for him, which is that rain or shine, in any circumstance, you must talk to only 10 decision makers every day and make a presentation about a candidate. That's it. It's that simple. And yet on a regular basis people use all sorts of excuses. I had a busy day, people coming through, calls, etc., not to make those 10 calls. And yet when they look at their billing at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, they've been significantly down on what they hope to achieve. And he said fundamentally it comes down to this one point, that they're not making 10 new connects, as he calls it, every day. And he said when he looks at super billers, the guys that are billing the big numbers, they just have a different way about them, a sense of discipline that come what may, they will always make those 10 calls every single day. So, turning the pages, there's a lot of stuff which is very detailed about working out the numbers, but I've given you the salient points. For him, he suggests that in addition to to-dos, and a lot of recruiters use to-dos, that they use a daily planner, and that you block out sections in your day about doing things at a certain time. It can be an electronic planner, it can be on a piece of paper, it can be an A4 pad, but come what may, if you plan it in detail the night before, then your subconscious brain has actually accepted that's what you're going to do the next day, and you come into work with a sense of, I don't know, power, determination, a self-knowledge that you're going to get things done, including of course that absolutely essential 10 decision maker presentations a day. He likes modularization and blitzing. Now this is an extension of the daily planner, but essentially what he does is he suggests that we work out in the day when we're going to do things that are most effective, not for us but in terms of the client point of view. So he suggests that maybe we make some really key calls first thing in the morning where we talk to decision makers. He calls them 3 friendly phone calls, or calls that lead to money. For my mind, I always like to think that the calls we make first thing are the calls that we need to make come what may. That if, for example, we're called away from the business because of a family emergency, we've actually had those calls and we've got it nailed, come what may. Most important things. And you don't wait till the morning to plan it, remember, you do it the night before. So you go away knowing what you've actually got to do. So he says that one of the greatest pieces of advice from a big biller, a guy called Robo Recruiter, was that when they come into the office in the morning, the first thing they should do would be the first thing that leads to money. And the second thing and the third thing. That might be talking to a prospective client, it might be prepping a candidate, it might be getting hold of a red hot candidate you need to get in front of a client that day or the next couple of days. So for him, modularization. And a lot of recruiters try this and they can't follow through. They like the idea, but it takes, Bob Marshall reckons, 30 days, a month of actual activity to change one habit from one to another. So it's going to be worth persevering. He also suggests that we spend, and I have to say that a lot of people are going to struggle with this, he says that you've got to be spending probably 3 to 5 hours a day on the telephone. Now in America that might be because you can't get through to decision makers that easily. For us, we get through probably, when we're doing really well, 50% of the time. But nonetheless, he says that consistently the people that are not billing, guess what? They're not spending time on the telephone. The 100-point plan is an interesting concept, and essentially what he suggests is that every activity that's got some value has got a point actually awarded to it. Obviously it has to be weighted. Let's say that a job taken on is going to be a higher point value than making a decision maker presentation. A first interview again will be a higher value than simply taking a vacancy on. But nonetheless, you work it out for your own desk, for your own business, and essentially you create a system whereupon the recruiter knows at the end of the day whether they've had a great day or a great week based upon this point system. So if you can do that, then you can walk out the door avoiding the dreadful thought, well, what did I do? Did I have a good day? The number of times that, and I know I've had it, I've left the office, locked up, turned the lights off, scratched my head and thought, wow, what did I actually do today? The 100-point system, or a variation thereof, stops that happening. It eliminates doubt, because if you know you've got to achieve 100 points, then it's easy to work out how close you got to that. So I think that essentially the Bob Marshall seminar is essential listening. He talks about, I'm going to read this out. I wanted to know how these guys were billing so much. Well, the first thing you notice with big billers is that what they do, and they do more of it more often. And he says that he was on the phone a lot, but if he was on the phone for 2 or 3 hours, they're on the phone for 5 to 6 hours. That's the first thing you notice with big billers. They're on the phone all the time. And it made a huge impact on him. And of course, whatever do you do, if somebody's practicing for 4 hours and somebody else is practicing for 2 hours, the guy that's practicing for 4 hours, whether it be cricket, golf, tennis, baking cakes, or recruitment, the person that's actually doing more practice or more development on themselves is going to be more effective than the person that's only doing 2 hours. He talks again about planning, and he says that, and I like this, he said that this isn't his stuff. He said this is stuff that he's gleaned from big billers around the world, and he said you might not want to hear it, but essentially this is the truth. And if you're not prepared to commit to adapting your style to using some of these systems, you're not going to be a success on a continued basis. Sure, you might have the odd month here or there where you have a really good month and you think, wow, that's because I've been fantastic. But then the next couple of months you'll have a bit of a nightmare. And he said the reason is because you're not following a system, you're not planning, and you're not developing your skill by working on yourself enough. So there you go. It's my recommendations about the Bob Marshall seminar. I suggest that you have another listen in detail, or maybe pick up the transcripted notes and have a read. Good luck.